is going to make that football team great. The players, though, have to execute this for it to be a success. And that's kind of what he did. Hopefully here we're going to be able to connect.
I got it.
Let's get.
All right.
There you go, Coach. How you doing, brother?
I had you muted. I don't know why, Danny. I listen to your shows all the time. I just said enough. I think
Coach, tell me this, though, for you. I mean, let's take you back to February 9th. They didn't blitz one time. And you said it, Coach, right before the start of the season. You said, look, Vic Fangio is going to bring a great system in.
Yep.
It's just going to be all about the players executing and excelling. How surprised were you in what they did, not only throughout the year, but especially what they did to Kansas City in the Super Bowl?
Well, my first thought was if someone's sitting there with an early pick and there's a great defensive lineman on the board or a great offensive lineman, it should be an easy decision now. You take those defensive linemen. And you know, we know Kansas City, how good their offensive line is, and they couldn't hold up. And so that was the first thought that came to my mind. The second thought was, you know, in support of Vic, and you said it, Danny, when they hired him, you and I talked on this show, and I was a fan of his. The thing that impressed me more than anything is everybody's into this. It's a young man's game. It's on and on. Well, the Eagles defense, you know, with what was his name? You know, Mitchell, the rookie corner.
Quinion Mitchell.
The Gene, the safety, nickelback, whatever he played. I mean, you know, even Jordan, I was just looking at their depth chart before we came on here. I mean, the guys that they had on that defense, you know, obviously Jalen Carter. I mean, was there a lot of talent there? But these guys are only 1, 2, 3 years in the league. So they're young players. And for Vic to come in and put his scheme together, which we knew would happen, but then develop these players. And I love the non-blitz. I mean, you said it in the pre-show there, Danny, that I used to have to force myself to pressure about 15% of the time in all situations, whether it was third down, whether it was first and second down, whether it was red zone. You know, I felt like if we didn't do it 15% of the time, that, you know, we weren't going to give the offense anything to work on. So I kind of forced myself to do it. And a lot of times, you know, we would have the blitzes in every week in all situations. We would work on them, as you know. We'd work on our pressures with, you know, 5-man, 6-man, 0, bringing everybody. And we ran them from time to time, but not only when we really, really had to. And so I loved it. For them not to pressure and play coverage and just have Patrick Mahomes running for his life the whole game. I mean, it was a great game plan. But and you know what else too? That, and we used to always use the word "don't get bored."
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, you know, we put in that before the Eagles drafted Buddy Ryan drafted Jerome Brown. Part of the deal was Buddy was the head coach. He just got the job at the Eagles, and Buddy came down to Miami, and I said to Jimmy, "See if he will spend some time. I want to learn this 46 defense." Buddy spent all day with us. He worked Jerome out, did what he had to do with him, and we practiced it like a madman in the spring. And you know what? We never used it till the Florida State game, the last game of the year, because we didn't need it. We did not need it. And you know, and I remember, you know, I'd say to Jimmy, "Boy, this might be the week to turn him loose." And he says, you know, don't get bored. I mean, don't do it just to do it, you know. So Vic didn't get bored in that Super Bowl. He let the players play. He left them play fast, and obviously they got the results that they wanted.
Coach, I'm so happy you told that story because I got a picture of me and Buddy down when he came down in '86. He got that job. That was his first year, I believe, and he spent all that time with you. And then I remember Butch grabbing us, and there me, Stubbs, and Jerome, and Hawkins, and I think even Russell came in. He was a young pup at the time, but we sat there with Buddy. And Buddy was showing us about leverage in the 46, and, you know, he was watching our defense. He goes, well, shit, you guys don't need to really do a lot of pressure. You guys bring pressure yourselves. He goes, you don't know how valuable that is. And so when he came down, him and Jimmy were on better terms at the time, I guess, because he was really, really helpful, man. He showed us again what kind of showed me a little bit about what McMichael and how we played with leverage, and he showed Jerome a lot. I mean, I think even Norman Bramy was down there a little bit with us too when Norman was there, because Norman, I think we always knew that Jerome was going to go to the Eagles. But yeah, man, I mean, by the way, Coach, I see a lot of Jalen Carter. I see a lot of Brown in Jalen Carter, just a little bigger kid, but you see the same thing with Jalen too. You see a little Jerome in him.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's and you always want those defensive linemen like yourself that were playmakers in this. If you don't have playmakers in this scheme, and, watch what Matt Eberflus does now when he's at Dallas, because I spent a lot of time with him. I thought he's a heck of a defensive coach. Things got away from him. His offensive coordinator thing was a mess here in Chicago. His end of the game decisions were a mess here in Chicago. But I'll tell you what, the guy's a smart, good defensive coach. And I met with him when he first took the job, and I said, tell me about what are you? And he says, it's a combination of what you did at Dallas and what Tony Dungy did at Tampa Bay. The Bucs were a rush 4, but they were more cover 2, Tampa 2, and we were more quarters. But we were all about, rushing four guys up front, mixing in a little coverage, changing it up. And they were all about Sapp and Simeon Rice and those guys. I mean, it was the philosophies were the same. The coverages were different.
Coach, the Eagles have lost 5 starters off that team. Same scheme. Now they're counting on the young players. They had a lot of veteran guys. They had to move on because of the cap. And I said this, you tell me if I'm wrong and how I looked at how you guys built the Cowboys. I told everyone this. I said, you should have seen the amount of free agents that Dave and Butch and Jimmy would bring in for the first 2 years, 3 years down there. What they did was they knew that they didn't have the talent. No disrespect to Coach Landry, but he had old talent on the football team, and you guys had to immediately get an injection of great players there. So what you did was you brought in veteran guys. It's kind of what they've done this year, and they drafted. Were those guys brought in for the younger guys to compete so that you could get a better sense of what your younger guys were and who you drafted? Because, Coach, if they couldn't beat out the guys you brought in off the street, weren't those kind of the guys that you weren't sold on moving forward? Because that's kind of what I'm seeing now, that they've got to replace Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Darius Slay, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, their swing corner in Isaiah Rodgers, and Oren Burks, who did a really great job for them in the playoffs. All those guys got big contracts. How do you go about retooling a football team, especially if you're Vic, with some of the young talent that they do have on the team?
Yeah, the key for Vic, even when he was with the Niners, with Harbaugh, with Jim out there way back when, they never pressured. I mean, very little pressure. And, 5-man maybe at the most and mix it in. So his philosophy is his philosophy. That's not going to change. So if you're him, you're probably looking at this thing saying, the only way this defense works, the first replacement's got to be the guys up front. I mean, they could get the greatest linebackers in the world and the greatest secondary guys in the world, but if they can't get there with those 4 guys up front, they're going to have a problem. So that's, in this scheme, just as in ours, that was always the priority. How can we better our defense? Let's start up front and work our way back. So, I mean, I'm sure that's what they're looking at. Where are we at as a defensive line? Then once they solidify that, then they can move to the linebackers and then secondary.
So in your opinion, Coach, how they're going to build this thing and replace, they're going to build from front to back. They're not going to build from back to front. I mean, last year they had Cooper DeJean, but like you said, if you don't get pressure and those front 4 guys can't stop the run, I was telling people about Jordan Davis, and I said this, what people don't realize about a nose coach, he's not real productive. That's a problem for me because you guys taught me, you know, like I've told people, I had 100 tackles one year. I mean, those guys demanded that you were a playmaker, that you made plays. You guys wanted guys always around the ball. You always told us, I'll take a guy who maybe gets an 80% in his grade, but if that guy's making 10 tackles a game, I'm going to take that guy all the time. And when I look at Jordan Davis, Coach, the less he plays, the better. And I say this because when you keep teams and you win first and second down and you keep teams in third and long, that guy may not be a 3-down player, but that guy did his job, didn't he? And Jordan Davis, he's got a contract extension because my number one goal is, as a front, is to keep you in third and long. If you're in third and long, we're going to win that game, right, Coach? And that's kind of how you have to look at Jordan Davis because they had so many teams a year ago, including in the Super Bowl, Kansas City, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 9. That's why that nose tackle, especially in the 34. Coach, if you don't have the 34, you can't play a 34 if you don't have the nose.
No question. And yeah, I remember, I think it was Cortez Kennedy asked me, he said, Coach, you want our defensive line this aggressive? I said, yes. And he says, well, how aggressive? I says, play the run on your way to the quarterback. So try to visualize that I am coming off and I am going to get that much penetration. And obviously, if it's a running play, we play the run. But, you know, that's the only analogy I could come up with. He says, how aggressive do you want? I said, play the run on your way to the quarterback. That's how aggressive we want you coming off the ball.
I love that because when you used to call the defense, you would constantly call these gap crashes for us. And what we were doing was the gap crash was a great example of that. You would call that on first, second, or third. You didn't care when it was because you had players up front that were able to adapt into that gap crash, turn it into a pass rush, and we would switch on it because we always had our backside on that. But that was a famous play of yours, was running that gap crash, because you would run that. You could be first, second, or third down. It didn't matter. You wanted us getting back there and getting penetration and knock those guards off.
And the other thing that we liked about that is we knew you guys were going to get into the backfield, get penetration. And if it was a running play, the ball was probably going to be kicked outside. And once the ball got kicked outside, now our speed, you know, with our 2 outside linebackers, we were always playing quarters, you know, quarter, half. So we had safeties ready to fill inside out. And it was tough to get to the edge. If you were running sideways on our defense, good luck.
Nobody got outside on us. I mean, that was the only time I've told you it a couple times. The only time the coaches ever got pissed off at us. See that jersey hanging behind him? I'll never forget that day, man. I'll just remember the tables flying up and down. You son of just leave it. I'm going to leave it there, Coach. Let's get into Chicago. Coach, they've made a lot of moves. And a year ago, I kind of wasn't a fan because they built the team from the outside in. They went out and got perimeter guys. And they kind of forgot, you know, you build football teams from the inside out. And this year they kind of went inside out. They went and they traded for Tune from Kansas City. They're picking up more guys in the offensive line. If you're Caleb Williams, you've got to be exceptionally happy about what they're doing, especially in that offensive line. In your opinion, you think Chicago is one of those teams to keep an eye on this year?
Absolutely. I mean, their defense fell apart when Flus at the end, you know, had to turn the play calling over. I mean, they were a lot better, the football team, than what they ended up playing and their performance. But I would say this, that, you know, when you start game planning, you know, our starting point was always, regardless if we had all pros in the offensive line or we were just average, we would always say, what can the offensive linemen do? What can they do? And you know, as far as protection, what can they do as far as the run game? And once we came to the conclusion, okay, this is what these guys can do to be successful, then we kind of added the running plays along with that and the play action passes. You know, the Bears, they didn't have play action pass last year. And majority of the stuff was in the shotgun. I had a long talk with Norv Turner a couple of weeks ago, and he said, you know, one of the best things for his career was that he was under center. And he really didn't like the gun until it was third down and long. And he said the reason, and think about this. And then I called Tony Wise and we kind of had a little group chat because we were talking about Caleb Williams. And Troy made the point. He says, Dave, if we call it a three-step pass, let's use that for example. 1, 2, 3, the ball was coming out. Michael Irvin, our receivers, Jay Novacek, they knew 1, 2, 3, they better be turning because the ball was coming. So the pass routes were tied in with that. And then Tony said it made our lives easy because the offensive lineman knew 3-step. Big difference on how I'm going to block a defensive tackle as compared to a 7-step. 7-step, oh boy, I know where the quarterback's going to be. I better be set long. You know, my technique better be perfect. I better be banging guys in there because he's going to be holding the ball. Where 3-step, man, you just don't get beat inside. Quick set on them, get them slowed up, and the ball's going to be gone. So by being under center and doing everything off of that system, you know, Troy said that it made, and Tony Wise agreed, that it made the offensive line's production better. The quarterback was coming out, and the receivers knew where the routes were. You know, and Troy says you get these young kids, and they drop back in the shotgun, and they know the coverage, and they know the play, but they're standing back there, and they're waiting for the you know, the route to develop, and the linemen are he's not a fan, and he backs it up by legitimate stuff. And the last thing he said too, he said, you know, besides the timing of the whole thing, he said the timing, it helps the receivers, it helps the offensive line, and he just thought that the quarterback seeing it. And I never thought of this angle. He says when I'm under center and I take that snap, I walk up, I'm looking at the safeties, the linebackers, I'm reading the defense. I take the snap, I'm going back. Where's my eyes the entire time on the defense? He said, these defenses are tricky. Split second disguises. So now I'm in the shotgun. What does the quarterback have to do when he's in the shotgun? The first thing he's got to do is get the snap. And, you know, he's looking, even if it's a perfect snap, he's looking at it. A lot of times it's here, down there. Where's his eyes? His eyes are on the football. And that safety rolls from 2 to 3 or 3, you know, whatever it is. Man, I'm telling you, he made a believer out of me by talking, you know, the under center scheme versus the shotgun.
I got to tell you, that's one of the things they did different with Kellen Moore this year with Jalen, was they put him under center more, Coach.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
And again, like you said, the running game picked up from a year ago, plus Barkley obviously adding a more skilled guy. So you think for a quarterback, you're looking more down the field and you're going to drop into your progressions a lot easier under center than you are from shotgun, because the shotgun, like you say, you have to be hyper-focused on first receiving the snap. So for you, your eyeballs are looking downfield from the time you get the ball from center to getting back to your steps, whether it's a 3, 5, or 7. You think that you have more of an understanding of reading the defense better under center than you do under snap. And Troy thinks that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the other thing too is, and this is the way everybody does it now. So your shotgun with the back offset. The first time that we really was concerned with defending something like that was in that Fiesta Bowl at Miami, Danny, against Penn State. And I think their running back was D-Day Dozier, great player, first-round draft pick.
Yep.
And they did some stuff, runs with him, out of the gun, with him offset. And I remember us coaches, me and Butch and Campo and everybody sitting there saying, man, how's this guy going to get the ball? He's going to go to the side. It's real tough to get that thing and wind it all the way back. So we adjusted our defense to take away the front side and try to kick it outside that direction, thinking it was going to be real tough for him to cut back on our defense. You know, we were too good, as you know, you were part of it, and we were too fast. And and I remember I had LaShawn McCoy at Pitt. And Shady was a great player, great player. I mean, he broke some of Tony Dorsett's records in 2 years.
Yep.
And he's the all-time rusher for the Eagles right now.
Yep.
Him and I still converse back and forth. He invited me, wanted me to come up to Philly for the game when they do, induct his jersey or whatever they did.
They retired his jersey.
And I was working. I couldn't make it, but we were. I tell you what, we did under center and we did both at Pitt, but we were mostly under center. Henry Hanoski was our fullback, the Heine who played for the Giants and won a Super Bowl, big fullback. So we were old school, and that's just what we did. We believed in it. And I remember we were playing Notre Dame, and we still had all the runs out of the shotgun. God, Shady just, he says, Coach, I just can't. I have a tough time seeing it as quick and stuff, but we did it. Okay, he was talented enough that he could do it. So we get in, we're playing Notre Dame, the longest game in the history of Notre Dame football, Danny, for Notre Dame and for Pitt. It went into 4 overtimes. The sprinklers came on because they were on a night timer. That's how late the game went, 4 hours and something. And they finally miss a field goal, and we get the ball. So we make a few yards. And we need about 3 yards to give our field goal kicker a chance to make it, okay? So I call a timeout and call the offense over, and I said, Tony, what do you like? Matt Cab was my offensive coordinator. And they said, Tony's going to say 36 power. He ain't even going to think twice. And so I says, okay, guys, it's 36 power. We're going to run it. And I said, Shady, that tackle's going to block down. We're going to collapse that nose. You got to push that thing up in that AB gap as hard as you can and get us 3 yards. Don't look you just go as hard as you can. Keep your lip. I got it, Coach. We line up, I formation. Shady takes 2 steps and goes right to the sideline, right outside. Their safety comes up. He makes him miss. He ain't got to tackle him in space. He gets down to about the 10. We kick the field goal and win. I said, Shady, come here. After the game, everybody's fired up. Great win for the program, Pitt. And I said, Shady, why the hell did you run outside on 36 power? And he says, Coach, I was in the eye. I looked. Nobody was out there. Smart backs run where nobody's at, Danny. But my point was he was in the eye. And he took 2 steps, and Notre Dame ran something where they were closing that down. And he could have maybe pushed it for a yard or 2. But right away, he saw that. He had that vision and saw that backside cut, and he went right out the back door. But I said, why'd you run out there? He says, because nobody was out there.
Coach, I got to tell you a story. You reminded me of something that I don't think I've ever told you. So the first play of the Fiesta Bowl, I remember we're in the huddle, and it comes in. We're blitzing. I went, what? Jerome looked over at me. We're sitting at each other. We're going like, what are you talking about? We're blitzing. This is bullshit. What do you mean? He goes, we're blitzing. Winston goes, we're blitzing. And I sat there and I'm going like, okay, we never, ever blitz. And so I remember I make the sack on the first play of the game. I sacked the guy for a 15-yard loss. And I mean, because the 2 ends came up, they ran past him. That guy Schaefer ran right into me, and I annihilate him. Bang! Put him on his back. I jump up, and I'll never forget. Jerome looked over at me. He goes, talking shit on Dave? Look what he got you. The first play he came, 100 million people are watching us. You put the guy on his head. And I go back to the huddle going, holy shit, it worked.
You know what I remember of that game? It was after the first play, and our defense obviously was geeked, as you just described. We hit them in the backfield. And back then, you could take your helmets off.
Yeah.
And I was in the press box, and I'm looking through the things, with the blocking schemes and stuff. And all of a sudden, Jerome jumps up and rips his helmet off. And he had that Rambo bandana around his head, and he had the eye black across. And I remember Jimmy was on the phone. I said, holy shit.
Yeah. And he gave a salute. Don't you remember he gave the salute?
And he gave a salute to our bench. I says, holy shit. Hold on to this one. Here we go.
Oh yeah. Coach, the thing that aggravated me the most was
127 yards total offense they had. That record held at the Fiesta Bowl for about 15, 20 years for the least amount of yards. That's run and pass combined. I think
Coach,
they have 7 or 8 first downs.
No, get this. I gave them one. I jumped off sides. They gave
one.
7.
They had one by penalty. One
by penalty. We gave up 7 first downs and 129 yards in total offense. And I remember we're walking.
And they had great players. I think Wisniewski.
I played against Wisniewski.
They had guys that played a long time in the NFL too.
Wisniewski was on that team. I became friends with Steve later on. I remember going back to the huddle. I'll never forget going into the locker room and Jimmy looking over at me and he goes, "You guys couldn't have played any better." I mean, I was like, I looked at them and I said, "Man, how in the world?" You know, Coach, that lost to me to this day. I still look in the mirror about that and I still get reminded about that. I think that made you guys better coaches. Don't you think that loss that night made you guys better coaches?
Almost got us all fired, but yeah, it made us better coaches.
No, we almost got you guys almost fired.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the president and everybody would have been a lot easier on Jimmy and all of us if we would have kicked their tails. You lose a game, and with the Army fatigues and everything, now they got the hammer. They come after us, you know.
Yep, absolutely, Coach. It's always great catching up with you. I love the picture you sent too, man. And I can tell everybody, you guys are the same people that you were when I was 19 years old and where I'm at right now in my life. Thank you so much, Coach. I love you very much, and thank you again for doing this for me.
All right, Danny. Love you too, buddy. Be safe out there.
You got it. That is my friend Dave Wannstedt. What a great coach he was. What a great time we had at the University of Miami. Guys, do me a favor. Make sure you check my great friends out at Morgan & Morgan. Again, if you're ever injured, folks, the #1 injury law firm in America is Morgan & Morgan with over $20 billion recovered for their clients. Make sure, folks, you check out my friends at Morgan & Morgan with thousands of attorneys from across the country. Make sure you do it. If you're injured ever, check out John Morgan and Ultima Morgan's Morgan & Morgan. Again, for more information, go to forthepeople.com/big cells or pound law 529. That's FOR. thepeople.com/big cells or pound law 529. And do me a favor, you tell them Big Cell sent you.
This is Eric. When he got injured in a car accident, he called Morgan & Morgan. He not only gets a lawyer, he gets trial lawyers like Sam and Jessica